Hey there, Squirrel Army. How's it going? For today, we're talking about Crime Novelist from Karloff Manor.
You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing.
Alright, so 3 mana, 1/3. I do not care about the stats on this thing. It can grow itself, which, whatever. I don't care about that either. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you put a +1/+1 counter on it. Yeah, sure, whatever. I don't give a rat's. And you add a red mana. Now I care. Now this card's something that I would think a lot of people want to play. Whenever you sacrifice an artifact, you get a red mana. And that's pretty darn powerful. There are a few artifacts that are pretty cheap, to get out there on the field, even some that are 0 mana and things like that. The thing is to sacrifice them or sacrifice them specifically for free or whatever. But you can obviously do this very easily with treasures, obviously. But yeah, it's one of those things. So like treasures tap for an additional red sort of thing. So that's not that bad. Certainly. But then again, the thing is, like, you don't want that to happen if you're just, like, unless you're, like, in red. Like, obviously, this is a goblin, so it can go in a few goblin decks, maybe. But not a lot of those decks are really sacrificing artifacts, I don't think. So maybe there's one or two that I'm not really thinking about, but yeah, I don't really think many of them are doing that. It's a bard. I don't think there's any bard tribal, so that's out. But, again, if you're a Storm-style deck, like Joyra decks and things like that you're just spamming artifacts, Breya, decks like that where you're already playing a bunch of artifacts and things like that, and you have some sort of plan to perhaps sacrifice them or do other things with them and that sort of thing. Like if you have Wayfarer's Bauble, like your Wayfarer's Bauble is, generating you a mana, which is helpful sometimes. Like, again, I said treasures obviously is pretty darn good. Same with, like, clues. Even food. Like, food's probably one of the worst ones, but still, like, you get 1 mana back, so that's okay. So it sort of makes some things that sort of cost more, cost less as well. But there's obviously combos that you can probably do with this. Obviously ones that I'm pretty much unaware of, because I'm usually unaware of a lot of this sort of stuff until somebody shows me how it works or whatever, until like I stumble upon it at some point or whatnot. Like I'm usually like one of the last people to know. I just like do not think that way. I don't really like I say, like the counters on this thing, that doesn't really matter. I don't really think. Like, sure, you can make it really big at some point, I guess, but it's not like it's getting in combat or really doing anything with all these counters on it. Like, I don't think there's anything that really cares about creatures having counters in these colors. I could be wrong, again, but, like, maybe, like, the Dethroned decks could, maybe, but I don't think that's that relevant, honestly. I don't think it really flies, so to speak. I don't really think it would add a lot. There are a couple of decks that are in green now, which like is super weird to me, that actually care about artifacts. So obviously you can put it in some of those Gruul-style decks or whatever as well that do care about artifacts, because you are going to be sacrificing some of those artifacts sometimes, and just getting an additional mana can really help. Get that deck to go from being, oh yeah, some stuff's happening, to being like, oh shit, some stuff is happening over here now, boy. So that's the kind of card that I feel like this is. This is a very powerful card that goes in a bunch of like strategies. Like artifacts are one of the most like, popular strategic types in EDH, so it's kind of like, well, this is just going to make them a whole lot more popular and a whole lot more better. Like, I have one deck that kind of maybe wants to think about this, but the problem with that deck is it sacrifices things at the end of your turn and that, So you really wouldn't be able to like get much out of the mana that it creates unless you're actually going to go through the process of like actually sacrificing it in your main phase or your second main phase rather than, waiting to your end step or whatever just to sacrifice it. So I'm not 100% sure. I'm kind of on the fence about whether I want to put this in my deck. And one of those things, like we sort of say, nothing is an auto include. You've really got to think, well, do I have enough things to sack artifacts to or whatever, that sort of thing, or should I put more in? What are some really good ones, etc. And like, does that critical mass of putting those in mean that I can't even fit this guy in? Or whatever, or whatnot, or does that mean that, hey, well, now the deck doesn't really work the way that I want it to work because I've taken out too many pieces that actually make the deck work and make the deck come just to try to accommodate this, and now I don't even have space for this. So it's like, well, I tried to make space for this, so now, and make a whole bunch more things to sacrifice things, but now I don't have enough space to put it in. So it's just like, it's not a very, intuitive process sometimes that you kind of got to go through sometimes and think about. Like, even, like, it's funny that this thing has 3 toughness. Whatever. Fine. I'll take more toughness over more power, certainly. That's just me, because I'm always thinking about, like, if you're getting it into combat, you want more toughness anyway, just so that it survives more likely, or whatnot, unless you've got like double strike or indestructible or something else to really protect it, like, and things like that, or death touch, first strike, things like that. So yeah, but that's obviously like the lowest tier thoughts on it there with like doing it into combat, but you certainly don't mind when you say, oh, well, somebody just cast Blasphemous Act. Well, I'm going to sacrifice 13 of my artifacts and, or whatever it is, 10, 11 of my artifacts so that this guy survives, and I'm also going to make, 11 mana. I'm sure you can do something with 11 mana, I don't know, but still, like, even if you can't, like, even if you can only do something with a couple of those mana and you let some of it, like, fizzle out at the end of the phase or whatever, like, you still be able to, like, use that mana somehow, surely, like, and that sort of thing. So it is well worth, like, considering it, and I am, as I sort of said, considering it for my own decks. I've only got one real deck that I think it could go in, so I'm starting to think, now, can this fit in? How can it fit in? As I sort of said, what can I put in to support it? Will that be too many things that take away from the overall strategy? Will that be too many things and now I can't fit this in? Etc, etc. So I'm just going through, like, it does sacrifice things, like the deck, as I sort of said, sacrifices things itself. But again, it's at the end step, so you're not really going to be able to use that mana unless you got something to sort of hold it over in some way. So yeah, I'm sort of on the fence, like I sort of said, thinking about it for my own deck. But certainly when you're thinking about it for your deck, you've got to consider that. Like, at what time are you sacrificing things in general, or the artifacts in general? Because if you're just, like, sacrificing them in your opponent's turn, then sure, maybe you can, like, get some advantage, but, like, how much advantage are you going to get? Like, again, unless you're have a lot of activated abilities, or you have a lot of way to play at flash speed, I feel like you should really rethink something like this if you're planning to do that sort of stuff in your opponent's turn, because you're not going to be able to use that mana very easily unless you've got lots of activated abilities or lots of things to happen at instant speed, effectively. So, yes, you can certainly sort of do that trick where you sacrifice a treasure as well and get an additional red mana. You don't need to pay for color cost with that red mana, obviously. So you can just cast a instant or whatever it is just to protect your board or whatever it is, as well, or you can just even just have floating mana there that doesn't really do anything, I guess. But then what's the point? Like, so, but I don't know. Certainly, yeah, that's where I see it. It's certainly going to be a very powerful card in the decks that it is very powerful in, but you've really got to be considering what you're doing with it and how you're doing it with it. Like I said, in my deck it might work, but I've got to really think about how it's going to work and what I'm going to put in there to support it, and whether that's going to take up too much space or whatever, because again, like it's tough to find space no matter what. So yeah, but that is what it is. And I said, if it works, in a sense it does work, but it doesn't always, because it's like, well, how often am I going to get my things to sack things or whatever? So yeah, it's not like I have a lot of tutors. I never play tutors, basically. So yeah, that's where I'm at with that, and just thinking it is good, certainly, especially for an uncommon. This is pretty darn good. I think, like, if they put a +1/+1 counter piece off of this card, and, you know, I don't know, dropped like 1 mana off of this thing, even, like, this could be a really good, like, rare. Like, it could be a decent rare if it was 2 mana and didn't put counters on itself. At 3 and it puts counters on itself, sure, whatever, that's fine. Like, I don't think it's, like, mind-bogglingly powerful. Like, again, everything dies to removal or counter spells or whatever, that sort of thing as well. So it's not like it's unstoppable or whatever. It doesn't have, you know, any kind of protection, and that's what I'd rather. I'd rather it not have, like, it gets counters or whatever. I'd rather it just have ward or something like that, because then it protects itself, or whatever. Or if it said, when you sacrifice an artifact, this thing gains ward or whatever till end of turn, and you get a red mana. Like, I don't know. That'd be really good, because at least then, you know, you've got some level of protection. You do have to sort of pay for it. Or even if it said, you know, when you sacrifice a artifact, you make a red, and for 1 red, you can give it ward 2 or something. I don't know. Like, something like that to balance it out in some way. I don't know. Like, but then again, I guess it could have been too good just to be able to be like, for free, I can, or semi-free with a treasure and have 1 mana floating, so I can give it ward 2 again if I really want. So that could have been really too much, so you basically give it ward 4. So that'd be stupidly good, certainly. But, like, there should be a space for, like, this to get protection rather than just counters, because the counters aren't really that good, I don't think, to the strategy. If it pinged things or pinged opponents or whatever, that would even be better. So I'm sort of going through some of the stuff that would make it better, but it doesn't need to be, like, the best card in the world. But I'm just saying, like, these are some of the things, like, if you're looking at, like, how good it is, like, the whole counters thing, that's just, like, I don't know. I don't think that's the gravy part of the text at all. I mean, it's all right, I guess, but so I guess it's the gravy part of the text. The mana's what you really care about. Like, so you don't really care about the counters. Like, I'll probably 9 times out of 10 forget about the counters or even the mana, because that's the way it happens. But yeah, it is what it is sometimes. Like, there's, like, especially with new cards, and especially when you got, like, 50 new cards coming out every 5 minutes or whatever it is is tough to remember what every single one of them does exactly, and how some of the rules exactly work. Certainly not with this that much, but still, like, yeah, it can be one of those things that you kind of forget. Like, oh yeah, it puts counters on itself. Yeah, whatever. No one cares about that, because it's irrelevant pretty much. So, but anyway, guys, those are my thoughts on this one. You guys can let me know what you think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. Am I so super wrong or so super right? Whatever you want to tell me, you think about what I think about this card. You can let me know down there in those comments. Hope you've enjoyed this one way or the other. I hope you'll join me again in another one.